Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast. This is episode 210, and this week we are talking with Nevada McPherson. She is the author of 3 graphic novels to date, several screenplays, and today's book that we're going to be hearing all about, which is Poser. You're also going to hear all about her background in writing, how she teaches English and creative writing down in Georgia. We're going to be discussing the importance of notepads and sticky notes, her writing schedule, what makes good writing, how sometimes characters just come to you, and falling in love and inspiration from the locations that we sometimes visit. All that and so much more is coming up here real soon. You're going to really enjoy this conversation with Nevada. She is a delight to talk to and just so much fun. So stay tuned for that. It's coming up here in just a couple of moments. Meanwhile, I don't know if you can tell it or not in my voice, but yeah, I've been a little knocked down here recently. Caught a cold, and there for a couple of days, I didn't think it was going to be any big deal, just kind of a cough. But surprisingly, it really knocked me down through the weekend. Fortunately, I still had a nice weekend. I had a nice Easter, but since Sunday, since Easter itself, I've been a little out of it. So much to the point that I just realized this is release day as I record this. So hopefully I can get this episode up today on April the 19th. But if not, it may actually be Wednesday the 20th when I get this up. But either way, as you're listening to this, it's release day. So, and hopefully you had a good Easter. Made sure to indulge in a nice big hollow bunny, the hollow chocolate bunny, and got a little bit of writing in once in a while when I wasn't sleeping. But otherwise, yeah, it was a very pleasant Easter. We had gone up to my in-laws for the weekend, for the few days before that, to do a lot of work outside. And again, I felt pretty good for that. Aside from the cough, I felt pretty good doing that. It actually felt really good to do the exertion, the work that we did outside. So that felt good. But man, it sure did knock me out on Sunday, on Easter Sunday, and been a little down since then. A little knocked down, but not to worry. I am definitely on the way up again. Actually feeling not too bad today. It's mostly just in my voice and in my sinuses now. But anyway, rest assured, I will be feeling much better next time you guys hear me. Oh, before I forget though, I do want to give a special thank you to George Sirois over at Excelsior Journeys podcast. He had me on as a guest. I mentioned it last week, but the episode hadn't dropped yet as of that episode 209. But it did come out later on, and it is a fantastic episode. George really puts on a good show, and he and I had a really good chat. If you want to hear a little bit of behind the scenes of what all went into the creation of this show back, 5 years ago now, then make sure to check it out. I got a link in the show notes for that. And check out some of George's other episodes. He's got a really good show. It's one I think you're going to really enjoy. But with that in mind, I don't think I'm going to spend too much time this morning talking about other things. We'll go ahead and discuss the show sponsor, Scrivener, which, of course, is what I do all of my writing on. And I mentioned last time how I've been able to go in and open up a few chapters side by side in side-by-side windows, so that I can see, a chapter that I'm rewriting and another chapter that I'd written before, and I'm actually combining the two. And it's that and so many other amazing features within Scrivener is why I love it. Hey, stay tuned to this advertisement so you can hear how to save 20% on the regular desktop version. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. And thank you again to Scrivener. I also want to thank affiliate of the show, Writer's Block Coffee. Writer's Block Coffee has 3 delicious flavors. There is my personal favorite, the Whiskey Barrel Aged Blend, which, oh my gosh, that is so good. There is the Deadline Dark, which is what you want to brew when you are burning the candle at both ends and staying up late, like Nevada likes to do. Although I don't know if she'll drink coffee that late at night. I don't know. But then there's also the regular Writer's Block Blend, which is just their standard version of the coffee, and it's very, very flavorful and very good. I highly recommend you try out one of these or all of them. You can order one, you can order them all. You can also order one at a time or set up automatic shipping each month so you never run out. Click the link in the show notes so that way you can get right on over to Writer's Block, and that link is already programmed with our discount. But you can also go to writersblock.com and just enter coupon code sample chapter at checkout to save yourself 10% on your order. Finally, I want to thank my friends over at Pop Goes the Culture Network, home to about 10 other incredible shows, all of them pop culture related and all of them wonderful. Check out the Multiverse Tonight or the Two Dads Review, just for example, or of course the flagship show, Pop Goes the Culture Podcast. Tons of great stuff over there, including articles and celebrity interviews. Really good shows and information and good stuff happening at popgoestheculture.net. So click that link in the show notes for more. As always, I invite you to follow along with the show on social media. Find us on the platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just very easy to find. It's the Sample Chapter Podcast on any of those. You can also contact the show through email at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com or leave me a voicemail by calling 660-851-1146 and leave me a fun voicemail and you will hear that on an upcoming episode. All right, everyone. Well, without further ado, let's hop on over to our interview with this week's wonderful guest, Nevada McPherson. Hey, Sample Chapter listeners, welcome back to another exciting episode. This week, we are talking with Nevada McPherson, who lives in the southern Gothic town of Midgeville, Georgia, former site of the world's largest lunatic asylum, which I think is pretty neat little tidbit on there. Her first novel, Poser, just came out. It's the first of a series, and we're going to be hearing all about that. But Nevada is also a graduate of LSU's MFA program in screenwriting. She's written several award-winning screenplays, created 3 graphic novels to date, and penned countless to-do lists, something we're all familiar with. All right, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Nevada McPherson.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to have you here. Now, I am so interested by so you're in Georgia. You spent a long time in New Orleans, but
yes.
your first book is talking about Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Now, how does that come about? Where did that, or how do you go about writing on the other side of the country like that?
Well, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, my husband went out to, we both went out to Stanford, but he was teaching a speech, kind of like a speech and debate summer camp out there at Stanford. And I was there and I was helping students do research papers and things like that. And we had never been, I'd really never been to California before, except for just, very briefly kind of just going through a few places on a road trip one time a long time ago with some family members. But I'd never been to San Francisco before, and I'd never been to Palo Alto. I really didn't know much about it at all, or anything about Palo Alto really. But I just fell in love with the place. I just thought it was fascinating. I loved the weather there. It just seemed to have kind of an exciting vibe to me. It was just, there was something about it. And we went back there for several years for the summers. And I just really, I don't know, I was inspired by it. There were some of the places I would walk around every evening. I like to do evening walks. And I just really, I enjoyed walking through some of the neighborhoods there. And I remember seeing this image one time when I was walking in one of the neighborhoods. I was walking by some houses, and I could see kind of in the backyard, past some of the shrubbery, there was somebody sitting at a table under a patio umbrella, and they had like a really nice cocktail sitting on the table in front of them.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, that is such a neat image. That was kind of an evocative image to me. And I thought, I might put that in a story someday. And so it does in a little bit different way. It does make it into poser. But it took, after a couple of summers, I had come up with a story. And so I wrote it originally as a screenplay. And then I decided to adapt it into a novel later.
That is fascinating. I love that. I love talking to my guest authors on here and hearing how something like that can get into you just visiting someplace and how it gets into you. And I've experienced that myself, where you go someplace, and like 2 years ago, for instance, my wife and I, we went down into the southern Ozarks in Missouri,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we came across so many interesting sights that just we kept thinking like going down this one lane, and it had trees on either side, and even in the middle of the day, and it was midsummer, it was dark down this lane, and we thought, man, if it was nighttime, I mean, this would be pitch black down this lane. And my wife is talking about how creepy it is, and my mind is just going crazy with story ideas, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, and then the monster's coming out right over here, and I'm plotting it out and ready to go. And I love how that seeing it's different in an author's mind, I think, than somebody else.
It really is. I mean, it's like just a little image or just a snippet of an image can just inspire you and kind of spark your imagination. And I love that about visiting new places.
Hmm. Yeah. And you go back there periodically still?
Yes, I've been through there a couple times. I was there. I went to a writers camp at Community of Writers. We went out there, and it's at Squaw Valley, near Lake Tahoe. And my husband stayed in Palo Alto while I went to the writers camp. And then when I came back, we spent some time around Palo Alto a few years ago. But I want to go back as soon as I can. I just really love the downtown area, and I love, kind of the area around the university, and of course San Francisco. I haven't been there in a while, so I really, really want to go back as soon as possible.
Oh yeah. The story idea that I had for mine in the Ozarks has kind of faltered since then. Um,
Oh,
I've had well, I mean, it's okay. I've had two other books have come out since then, but yeah, it's I think about it every once in a while, and I think maybe I should just go back there. I should just take my wife. We should go back down and visit again and try and get some more of that inspiration and see where it goes.
yeah,
But that would be fun too.
definitely should.
So now you teach English and creative writing throughout the
Yes.
day. What is that like for you as far as, I mean, does it exhaust you, or is it energizing you to be teaching it all day and then coming home and doing your own work, doing your own writing?
Well, it can be exhausting sometimes, and sometimes it can be energizing because, because I learn a lot from the students. And in the creative writing class, like today, I thought, well, I'm kind of tired. We might spend part of the class pitching, and then maybe give them some time to work on some stuff. But we spent the whole class pretty much them pitching their ideas, and we would talk about them, and kind of what they wanted to do with some of their story ideas. And I was tired, when walking in there and coming out, I felt energized and excited for them. So that's always wonderful when that happens. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. That interaction, and there's times when I used to prior to COVID, when I would go to my writing club, I was just tired and I'm like, I'm just going through the motions tonight. I'm going to go and sit down, but I'm not going to share anything. I'm just going to listen.
Right.
But then when I get home,
Sometimes
I'm
you
like,
have that feeling. Yes.
yes, yes. And by the time I'm home, I'm like, oh, yes, I need to stay up late because I can't wait. I just had this idea. And yeah.
Yeah, it's great to get fired up like that. And I'm kind of a night owl. I do stay up late. I might be tired earlier and then I'll kind of get a second wind and feel like I could stay up all night and I could still make it tomorrow. But then, you got to take a nap the next day. That's all.
Yeah. I was going to ask what your writing schedule is like, if you're like a morning person or evening, or if you
Well,
pepper it in throughout the day.
I tend to, well, like I said, I do like to stay up late at night. Sometimes I keep some crazy hours. It depends on if it's during the summer. I keep a lot of late hours, and I do during the school year sometimes too. But then I'll try to switch it up a little bit. I used to do a lot of early morning writing. When I was in college, I would get up super early in the morning and try to be the first one at the coffee shop. I had just discovered the magic of cappuccino, and I would try to get there and have my cappuccino and enjoy my writing time before going to work at the bookstore before class. But lately it's more late night schedule when it's
Oh.
quiet and you know
Hmm.
like that.
It's interesting. I will write kind of throughout the day. I'll pick it up and I'll read the last paragraph or so, and then I can get back into it and like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is where I was going with that, and then just kind of go from there. But yeah, that editing phase, that's when I really hunker down. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm burning the candle at both ends now and
Yeah.
staying up late.
That's great. Well, sometimes you find yourself just in a loop of editing and you'll edit and edit, then you'll think, oh, it's okay. Then you'll let it cool off a little bit and then go back and think, I need to edit this some more. And it's like, it seems like, well, is this process ever going to end? But eventually it does for the most
Hmm.
part. So, but yeah, that's great that you keep at it throughout the day.
Yeah, my wife has learned that if I'm texting away on my phone, I'm not actually texting. I'm probably writing or something else, unless if I don't have my laptop with me. But
Yeah. Whatever. If you carry a little notebook, do it on your phone,
exactly.
whatever means you have to do it. That's and especially when the mood hits you and you're inspired. That's one thing I feel like, well, if I'm staying up late and I think, well, I've got to get up in the morning, I really shouldn't stay up late. But then I think, but I'm in a groove, I'm in the flow, I've got to keep going while I can.
Oh my goodness, yes, yes.
There's that too.
Now, how often, whenever you are teaching, how often does that inspiration hit you and you're like, I got to go write this down, or do you like stick it out and wait for the end of class to write it down?
I might have to jot something down from time to time. I feel kind of weird if I don't have a notebook with me all
Mm,
the time.
mm-hmm.
And even if, like you said, even if it's just jotting down a few words or something just to spark, my memory later, I always have a little notebook and I fill up a lot of those and kind of put them in my bookshelf later. But I have little notebooks, those little journal books, whether it's an old what is it, spiral bound notebook or one of the
Yeah.
kind, the little leather bound or whatever. I try to have something with me at all times. And even in my purse, I carry, those little pads of sticky notes and, you know, any, I feel weird if I don't have something that I could write on at any time in
Me
case
too.
I
Me
think of
too.
something. Or
Yes.
if I
Aren't
think of a line of dialogue, I'm like, let me jot that down because that's just what I wanted. And
I
you never know when that might hit you. So you got to have something to write on.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I have a file in my phone of interesting names.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Just names that I come across. I'm like, oh, I like that name. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in here for a future person. I don't know who that would be, but man, that name would be really good for like a bad guy or something.
Yes. And now that you're saying that, I'm thinking of a name I saw the other day, and I thought that name or some variation on it would be great. And now I'm trying to remember. I think the first part of it was Truman, but it was a great last name, and I can't think what it was now. I realize I better start keeping up with some names because sometimes if I can't think of the right name for a character right at that moment, I'll just leave it blank, and I know
Oh
I'll
yeah.
know that I'll find the right name and I'll come back. Like I'm working on a short story now, and I've got, I'm going to have to name some people. I've got the names of the main characters, but I'm going to have some other names. And so I'm like, well, I'll have to come back and fill those in.
I can identify with that. I have two different characters right now in a story I'm doing, and it's blue-haired guy and buzz cut.
Yeah, oh, that's good. That'll work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, so as a teacher and a writer yourself, then what, in your opinion, makes good writing?
Wow, that's a good question. I think something that flows well. And then I remember years ago, my very first creative writing professor talked about how when you're writing something, you're trying to take somebody through an experience. And so whatever best does that, I think if you can, and then there's that thing, if you can make people feel, I think, like just with my screenwriting training, if you can make people visualize, what it is, and even it'll take shape in their own imagination. But if you can make that, make it easier in a way, just for them to be able to follow and for the story to flow and, that kind of thing. I think that makes for good writing for, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
For me.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that too. Yeah, when it's got a good flow to it, when it's not being interrupted by something that takes you out of the moment.
Exactly. Anything. I don't want things, you don't want, to me, I don't want things that'll take people out of the story. If they're into the story, I want them to stay into the story.
Yeah. There are times, I guess, where you can do something where it's like, whoa, where did that come from? But as long as it fits with the story, and it's not gonna, like you said, if it's not gonna make the reader jump out and be like, wait a minute, what?
Yes. Where they have to flip back and go, wait, now what?
Yeah. Was that? Did they talk about this before? Yeah.
I just want them to keep going forward. But if there's something they want to go back and reread, but I don't want them to feel like I have to know what's going on, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, did he always have blue hair? Wait a minute. Let me go back and look.
Yeah. That.
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, now how do you handle criticism? Since you teach it as well, do you get any criticism on your own work, and how do you handle it?
Well, I remember in writing workshops, I remember once again, my first creative writing teacher used to talk about how, some things, something that you're doing may or may not be somebody else's cup of tea, so you do have to keep that and take that into account. And, I've read what Stephen King says about some of that too, with, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I think, you do have to accept, there's things I could go back and make better. And that's one of the things I loved about my first creative writing workshop is, people didn't by any means love everything I wrote at all, but I always left that workshop energized because I felt like, they gave me constructive feedback, and some good insights to go back and work on it and make it better. And so that's what, if it's criticism, it's, things can get into personal remarks and really negative. I've seen some workshops like that before too. But to me, if you can, if somebody can give me some thought on, how could I improve it, or what is it that needs to be improved? That's the kind of thing I would look for good feedback.
Yeah.
What can I do to make it better?
Exactly.
Kind of
Yeah. And that's something I've learned about myself is I actually I don't mind feedback. I look at whether or not I find it to be valid.
Exactly.
And whether or not I agree with it. And even if I don't agree with it, I'll still look and see where they're coming from with it.
Yes.
So, but yeah, otherwise my wife gives me great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My wife gives me great feedback and she does not hold back. Oh my goodness. She does not hold back. Oh man, there
honest.
are, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good because it makes me look back at my work and go, oh, okay, well, you know what? I see what you're saying here. And
yes. And I appreciate that with the editor I've been working with, Paige Johnson at Outcast Press, gives great feedback. And I really, really value and appreciate that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, Outcast, they've actually they've been a part of a few of my past guests on here. So that's a great press. I'm glad that you were able to find a home with them.
Me too.
So now, before we go back over to Poser, I wanted to talk a little bit. You also do a little bit of, you've got a few graphic novels under your belt. Now, how did that come about?
Well, that comes from, well, let's see. With screenwriting, I wrote a short screenplay a few years ago, and I made that into it was a short film. And it was through directing the short film, I storyboarded it. And it was through storyboarding that I kind of thought, wow, this is like, it would be interesting to do this with one of my feature screenplays that I've written. It's kind of like directing it on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would be really interesting. And see, I used to draw years and years ago. I used to draw a lot, and I had kind of gotten out of that. And so when I first started trying to do that and adapt one of my scripts, it was more or less like stick figures. And so I thought, ooh, this is harder than I thought. And it took a really long time to get back into the groove of drawing. I don't know if you've ever, like the early versions of The Simpsons, you know how those are really, really different from the later version.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to go through several versions of it to try to get it to where it looked enough like, you could, the characters that I envisioned and things like that. But that's how I kind of got into it. And so that's how, I feel like my drawing had gotten a little better, or maybe a lot better in the last one I did, but I need to get back. I need to kind of keep in practice with that, because it does take practice. And I think too and I know this happens with me. I've heard that Flannery O'Connor is from Milledgeville. Well, she's originally from Savannah, but she lived in Milledgeville. And she said that she painted a lot in addition to her writing, and she started out doing comics, and then she switched to writing. I believe while she was at Iowa Writers Workshop, she had started out I think they put her in the journalism program with her comics, and then she decided, well, I don't know, I think I'm going to switch to writing, and the rest is history. But she talked about how a lot of writers that she knew paint. And she said, and some writers, it's not because they're that good at painting, but it's because it makes them really look at things closer. Oh. And through doing the graphic novels, I can tell it made me look at things closer, and, looking at people closer, and just, the things that I was drawing. The first graphic novel I did was set in New Orleans. And so I would draw a lot of the stuff I would see every day, which I found New Orleans fascinating. I never got tired of walking around there and just all the things that you would see. And just even writing down magazine streets, you see characters. And sometimes my husband would say, some of these folks look like characters in your graphic novel. I'm like, oh, thank you. So they look like people, So but that's how that came about.
And that's fascinating about the extra creative output and how it's making you look at things differently. And that's very insightful. I hadn't even thought of that before.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, I did, let's see, the first one was Uptowners, the first graphic novel I did. And then the second one was based on one of my screenplays it was a gay teen romance set in the 1950s in the rural South, and it's called Piano Lessons. And so there's that one. And then the third one is is a sequel to Uptowners, but it's called Queensgate, and it's set in London. And so I had some pictures I had taken a while back in London that I kind of look at for inspiration for some of the backgrounds and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And, to your point about The Simpsons, I remember a little bit about my age. I remember going to the movies, and that's where you could see The Simpsons. Back in the day when it was on before the movie would come on, you'd see a Simpsons short and like, oh, hey, these people again. This is funny.
Yeah, that's neat.
So,
the old cartoons, when they used to show cartoons before the movies.
Before the movie, that's right. Yes. So all of my younger listeners right now are rolling their eyes like, oh, man, you're old.
But it was fun.
It was. Oh, my goodness. So, all right. So your first novel then that came out, Poser.
Yes.
Now, what stands out to me is you have a failed drug dealer for your main character. Where does that come from?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know, sometimes characters just come to me, and I'm trying to think, maybe I don't know. He's from Texas, in the novel, but
Mm.
he runs away from home and ends up in San Francisco. And I'm trying to think back where because some characters I can think right away, oh, well, this is where this character came from. But I think some characters maybe just, I don't know, in the collective unconscious, maybe somehow, but it's like maybe some characters just come to you. And I'm trying to think back. That's a good question. But I don't know, maybe just looking at, I know one thing I used to think about walking around Stanford and Palo Alto and even San Francisco, and that there's a little bit of this around New Orleans. I used to think, wow, you walk around here at night, some of these buildings are open. And now there's probably not this way anymore, but we were staying in the dorm, and it's almost like it was the summer. There was there weren't that many people around except, a lot of the summer camps and some students. But it was like you could come downstairs in this basement and come to this TV room and nobody would even know you're here, kind of thing. And I thought, well, if somebody were trying to if somebody, just were trying to get around here, they could, in a way, up to a certain point, and kind of just, be here. And I was talking the other day about, there was a story when I was back in New Orleans. Then I read a story in the newspaper about how somebody kind of did that, pretended to be a student, and other students there thought they were a student, but then they got found out that they weren't, and they were living in the dorm and kind of participating in stuff, but it's because they just were there, just wanted to be there. And it was a news story. And I thought, wow, that's kind of like, well, it had a different name at the time, Arcadia, and then I decided, Poser, and I decided to make it into a series. I added a lot of material to it that I didn't have in the screenplay, and I've added a lot of new characters that I think have added much to it, to make it into a series. But maybe that's kind of where some of the idea of Ambrose came about, just kind of, trying to get by, trying to make it somehow, having a really rough time, feeling like he's slipping through the cracks, hanging on by his fingertips, kind of thing, just trying to survive and not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah. The subconscious part of your mind just kind of brought him forward.
Yeah,
and then,
I really think so. Just kind of a liminal character at first.
Almost like he told you, Ambrose told you, hey, here's who I am.
Yes. And I think he's become a lot sharper, into a lot sharper focus in the novel, as opposed to just in the screenplay.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So now, do you kind of write from the hip? Are you a pantser, or do you plan it out?
Well, I used to be a pantser. This one I did plan out. I worked on an outline, and sometimes I would sit. I had a big sheet of those what are they called? Drawing pads. Mm-hmm. And I decided to make an outline, and sometimes I would just sit and stare at that outline for a long time, and I would think, this shouldn't be this hard. But then I would just, and I would kind of move stuff around and erase stuff, and it got kind of messy. I had to redo it. But I guess sometimes I can be a pantser. But on this, I did work for more of an outline.
That's interesting. What's interesting to me is how that stands out. How you planned the story out, you knew what it was going to be, but the character came to you through your research.
I guess once the character showed up, then I tried to plan out his journey. And part 2, I've pretty much got done. But I have part 3 pretty much planned. And then I'll get visions, like I'll be out walking or something, and I'll get a vision of something, or I'll hear a song, and I'll think, oh, that's the next part of the whole thing. Oh my gosh. And I'll just get, I'll kind of get distracted for a minute. Then I'll say, okay, let me keep my mind on what I'm doing, but I got to remember that,
Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Well, go ahead and give us a little bit about book 1 of your series, or Poser. What is the story about?
Well, like you said, I mean, he's kind of a failed drug dealer. And he also works part-time at a S&M dungeon in San Francisco. And he has some bad breaks, like we were saying. I mean, he has a hard time. He loses his apartment. Um, he gets robbed. He runs afoul of, kind of his drug dealer boss and all that, and is kind of on the run. And then he has this friend and this girl that he has he has a crush on her, who also works at the S&M dungeon. She's a receptionist there, and she suggests that he stay at her older sister's house, at her guest house in Palo Alto, to kind of regroup and figure out what he's going to do next. And at first he says no, but then some other stuff happens. I mean, some other misfortunes, and he really doesn't know what to do. So he decides to take her up on it, take his friend up on going to stay at the sister's guest house. And it's not until they get to the sister's house, like they're in the driveway, that his friend Benny tells him that she has told her sister that he's a grad student at Stanford, because she says, well, that way she'll be more likely to let you stay here. And, like you're not going to be partying, in undergrad, but you're kind of, you really are looking for a place. That's what I told her. And he's just floored by this and flipped out by it, at the prospect of having to pretend to be somebody he's not. He's already in kind of a fragile state, and that just makes it way more stressful. But he really, at the moment, he really doesn't have anywhere else to turn. And so he decides to try to walk this tightrope that she's kind of created, for which he was already felt like it, but this even is more. But it's, between identities, which leads to other complications. And I guess one of the biggest complications it leads to is that he starts to fall for the older sister, Jessica, who's married, and that just leads to other trouble, as you can well imagine.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So that's kind of what gets us into it, and it goes on from there.
Yes, and this is book 1 of the series now, and it's got an interesting name. It's the Eucalyptus Lane series, or
the Eucalyptus Lane novels.
Okay.
One of the things I noticed out there, I just was fascinated, which I love eucalyptus. I used to see bundles of eucalyptus at places like, I guess, I don't know, Pier 1, remember Pier 1, and
yeah.
World Market, or just places. Sometimes I guess florists have those, and they smell so nice. But I used to see just trees full of eucalyptus out there, so I thought I would put that into it.
I like it. I like that. And yes, I remember Pier 1. Yep. I've been doing a lot of 80s shopping mall research lately in the last year or so. So yep.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's a staple.
Oh my goodness. Do you have an idea of how many books you might do in this series, or are you just kind of feeling it out as you go?
Well, I know there'll be 3. There'll be at least 3, and there may be a 4th, and beyond that, I don't know. But I know at least 3.
Fantastic.
Possibly 4. I've started having visions of a 4th, but it hasn't all come together yet. So, but 3, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Great. Well, where can people find and follow you so that they can will know where to get the next one?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm trying to think. I think it's at Nevada McPherson 3. And then at my website, www.nevada-mcpherson.com. That's my website. And that has order links. And that also has my other social media, my Instagram at Nevada Writes. So those are the best places to find me.
Outstanding. Yeah. And of course, everyone, I'm going to have links for that in the show notes. So you don't have to go searching. You just click right there in the bottom and you'll hop right over to her social media, to her website, and even a link for the Amazon site so we can go in there. And, a lot of people don't realize too, if you just follow the author, click on the author page, which you claimed your author page. I'm so proud of you. That's fantastic.
Yay, yeah.
It's amazing how many authors don't claim their Amazon author page.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, you claim your author page. And so if everybody goes in there and you click on follow, then automatically Amazon's going to let you know when the next book is available.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I have been so delighted in talking to you, and just so many times the light bulb has just gone off like, oh yes, I agree with you. And this has been so much fun.
Oh, Well, it has been. I've enjoyed hearing your stories too about the dark lane. I hope you get back there one day and get to write your story about that place. You got me intrigued.
I've got just like I'm sure, just like you, I've got a drawer full of half-written ideas that I'm like, oh well, I'll get back to this. Let me
Yes,
work on the one that's not done.
they're just sitting there, they're waiting for you to come back.
Exactly. They're just waiting for their time.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you again, Nevada. Ladies and gentlemen, time for me to step aside with my writer's block coffee and hand the floor over to my wonderful guest, Nevada McPherson with
Oh, thank you.
Poser.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm going to share a little bit from the beginning of Poser. And we were talking about, kind of how Ambrose, I guess, a little bit how he started to get in the situation he was in that led to him going to the guest house in Palo Alto. But this is from chapter 1. Ambrose stares through the dull windshield at the dark, hulking ruins of an abandoned warehouse, never having been to this remote part of San Francisco before. A bad feeling rises in his throat. I don't think he's coming, he says. He'll be here. Quiet construction sites glow in the distance beyond the lonely streets. Juan, at the wheel, smokes a cigarette, watching the rings billow out the window, nodding like he's listening to some tune only he can hear. In the rearview mirror, a pair of headlights turns a corner and pulls toward them. That's him, Juan tosses the cigarette and opens the door. Got your piece, right? Ambrose feels a skittering in the pit of his stomach. It's still in hock. I thought you knew this guy. Just wouldn't want him getting any ideas. The other vehicle, a wreck of a gold Dodge Durango, eases to a stop. Ambrose steps out of the car, trailing Juan as he crosses the street. The driver of the Dodge steps out with a creak. Juan stops short as if expecting someone very different. It's a skinny woman, mushroom white, with bleach blonde hair, shorts, and a halter top, despite the brisk weather. Something about her reminds Ambrose of his mom. You Juan, she asks. Who's asking? Manny's homesick, she says. I got your goods in the trunk, but first you got to show me the cash. Juan smiles, holding up a roll of bills. Let's see what you got, sister. Even in the low light, Ambrose sees the woman's face harden. Juan follows her to the back of the Dodge. She opens the hatch and Juan peers in, saying, Something don't look right. What are you talking about? The chick says. How do I know it's genuine? It's got Manny's stamp on it, see? She hands Juan a package as Ambrose rounds the back of the vehicle, shoulders tensing at the realization this is already not going well. Anybody can rubber stamp a fucking package, Juan says, slightly squeezing it, weighing it in his hand. Get Manfred's sick ass on the phone and let's have some verification. Better yet, maybe I'll open up one of these and check it out. You don't need to open it, she says. Juan turns to Ambrose. Got a pocket knife? Ambrose reaches into his pocket, scanning the area, unable to shake the feeling that they're being watched. As he grasps it, a figure in black pops up in the back seat and jumps out the opposite side. Look out, Ambrose blurts as the guy lunges. Juan tosses the package at Ambrose, nearly hitting his face. The pale, skinny guy from the car tackles Juan. The pale woman grabs his pistol, fumbling as she gets her hands around it. You throw that roll of dough in the back, she tells the man, her voice higher than before. Juan busts free from the apparent meth head as the whoop of a siren sounds, shattering all their nerves. The skinny woman turns to look and Juan snatches the pistol from her. Run, he tells Ambrose. All scatter as a police car comes hurtling from the shadows. Another siren blasts as Ambrose races away, clutching the package to his chest. The sound of an unseen motorcycle rips through the air as frantic images flash in his brain of a long ago evening watching Magnum Force with his drunk-ass daddy back in Riviera, Texas. He reaches the edge of the pier. The moto cop speeds towards him and past the squad car paused at the drooping caution tape around an abandoned excavation. Moto cop guns the engine. Ambrose steps over the guardrail. Officer Randall Burke skids to a stop, scrambles off his unit, then runs to look over the edge, where only black water swishes and laps. He turns, heart racing from the chase and the Adderall he snorted just before duty. He unwraps a stick of gum and pops it in his mouth, surveying the area for something he missed. That bastard's here somewhere, he thinks. Vermin don't just disappear into thin air. Below, Ambrose dangles by one hand, package tucked under his other arm, stamina draining by the second. He looks up, dizzy, and then down again, which is worse. Above, all's gone quiet, or maybe just muffled by the sloshing waves. He shifts the package, biting the corner of the plastic wrap so he can hold the pier with both hands. The package slips and he watches helplessly as it falls, disappearing into the darkness below. He can't even hear its tiny, insignificant splash. His body goes limp as he considers what it would be like to do the same, but he realizes now, facing the prospect, he was never a very good swimmer. Seconds tick by that seem like minutes. Using all his strength, he swings one leg up onto the ledge to start the tricky climb back over. He barely makes it, having hung on so long, arms sore, fingers raw. But as soon as he's back on top, he sees Motocop gazing at him, smiling. What happened to that thing you were carrying? Ambrose manages to stand up straight, catching his breath. What thing? Guess we could try to fish it out, but my colleagues already discovered your connection over there just had a trunk full of flour mixed with laundry detergent. Is that what you were trying to score? Ambrose maintains a blank face. I wasn't here to score anything, officer. The cop still smiles. Unusual for a cop smiling like that. He's chewing gum. Right. Well, we're hauling in your boy over there on a weapons charge and they're searching that Dodge, so just for fun, turn around and put your hands on the rail. Sighing, Ambrose turns, hands on the rail. Oh, and spread them, Motocop adds. Nothing else to do but comply. No weapons here. The cop grabs him and Ambrose sees that he's lost his smirk. Consider yourself lucky tonight. He takes a step closer, speaking quietly, menacingly. Goddamn lucky. And if I catch you trying to pull any shit again, you'd better make it worth my while. His breath smells minty, but there's something smoldering in his eyes. Now get the fuck out of here, gutter punk. He gives him a shove. As Ambrose starts walking away from the cop and the edge of the pier, he sees the squad car leaving with Juan in the back. Another squad car arrives, blue lights silently flashing. Motocop strides toward his unit, and another cop questions the skinny chick with the fake cargo. Her trembling sidekick sits on the curb, hunched over. Ambrose walks, heart pounding, hands buried in his jacket as each step puts more distance between him and that messed up scene. A deep sense of relief propels him faster, and the phrase his grandma used to say echoes in his brain. God watches over children and fools. He turns the corner where city lights rise in the distance, a dense and complex constellation.
Hey, that was Nevada McPherson reading a sample chapter from her debut novel, Poser. It is book one of the Eucalyptus Lane novels from Outcast Press. It came out just this past February, and it is a fantastic story, really an exciting story, and one that I'm going to have to add to my to-be-read file. Click the link in the show notes for this book and more from Nevada. And don't forget to find and follow her on all of the links I have below. I want to invite you to also check out our Podcast Friends affiliate links and sponsor down there in the show notes as well. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out next time when I'm back with an all-new author, a brand new book, and an all-new sample chapter.